Hello movers, I'm Tiago Cunha, a jurist here at Martins Castro, and this is the 4th episode of Season 2 of our special series on international mobility through investments. This is the final episode of our 4-part series featuring international guests, where we explore strategies to protect and grow your assets in the world's most stable and advanced economic bloc, the European Union. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with David Afonso, Equity Portfolio Manager at IMGA, and we'll discuss stock market, private asset, and the global investor perspective. Let's begin. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Our perspective here and our goal is to address the American audience about the stock market in Portugal. So I hand it over to you with this question. How would you introduce the Portuguese stock market to an American investor? What are the main features and main points that you think it's easy to clarify and to address this market?
Okay. Once again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's funny that you specifically asked about the American investors, because in our fund, besides the Portuguese investors that are, of course, the number one investors in nationality in our fund, the number two, right after the Portuguese, are the American investors. So what we usually explain to the American investors when we have meetings with them and try to explain the differences, because there are a lot of differences between the American stock exchange and the Portuguese stock exchange, it's the composition of the companies that are listed here in Lisbon, okay? We have a lot of more quality companies, a lot of more defensive sectors, okay? So, for example, if we take into account the two main sectors that we have here listed in Portugal, are two very defensive ones. So we have utilities. We have 3 listed companies here in Portugal that are very big and comprise more than 25% of the index, okay? And of course, utilities is a very defensive sector, okay? And then beside utilities, we have also consumer staples, which actually we have 2 stocks in this sector, and they are operators of supermarkets, okay? We have the number one operator of supermarkets here in Portugal, and actually the other company, which is way bigger, it's the number one supermarket operator in Poland, okay? So very interesting facts about the companies that are listed. So we have a much more defensive profile than when you think about the New York Stock Exchange, where you have a lot of tech companies, a lot of companies with a growth profile, okay? Here we have more well-established companies, well-managed, okay, with a long track record, well-established within their own industries. So it will be a little bit different of the perspective of an investor coming from the USA.
So what I'm hearing from you is we have similarities on the structure, and I think we addressed this along our conversation. But on investor perspective, we have a much more conservative, defensive profile, meaning less companies.
For sure. I mean, in the US, the main index is the well-known S&P 500, okay? Here in the PSI, we have nowadays 15 stocks, okay? All combined, the market cap is around 80 billion euros, okay? So in a perspective, if you think about the GDP of Portugal, which is around 280 billion, you see it's around in between 25 and 30% of the entire Portuguese economy. But if you think of the US, you have the S&P as a market cap of 50 trillion, okay? And a GDP of around 30. So it's a completely different dimension, okay? But still, there are interesting assets to invest to. And specifically for the American investor, let me try to explain a little bit more. We even find this diversification effect to be very good, in the sense that what we usually find is that the golden visa investor, they usually already have exposure to the stock markets, okay? And most often than not to the US stock market, because of course it's the biggest stock market in the world. So this kind of uncorrelation between the US assets that have a lot of growth, that have a lot of tech and healthcare companies, and this more defensive profile, it's kind of actually good. Let me just give an example to try to illustrate this with some numbers. I usually give the year of 2022 as an example. In that year, the S&P fell more than 20%, NASDAQ fell more than 30%, and actually our fund, the Portuguese equity fund that I manage at IMGA, was actually able to increase its value. So it's completely different and kind of uncorrelated with the US market.
So those differences, they actually amplify the portfolio of the client and help them diversify not only strategic wise on the investment per se, but also on the whole health of the whole environment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you should always look at your assets in a wholesome way, right?
In holistic way.
In a holistic way, exactly. So if you already own real estate, if you already own stock equities in the US market with this growth profile, maybe if you want to have a little bit of stocks with this more defensive profile, maybe equities in Portugal could be a very good way. I mean, Portugal is in the European Union, is in the Eurozone, so in a very stable environment politically as well. So it has this kind of pluses that an American investor could look when, of course, pursuing the golden visa. The golden visa.
Yeah, when we discuss about golden visa, and I want to explore this a little bit further, we see a lot of value on the residency per se and as a pathway to nationality, but also on investors' perspective. How is Portugal, and how are those companies listed on the Lisbon stock market attractive for on a revenue, on a return perspective to the American investors?
Okay, so that's also a very different point of view between the American investors and us here in Portugal. I mean, the US, if you look at the price to earnings of the multiple in the US, it will be for sure much higher than in Europe. And then if you look to take a comparison between Portugal and Europe, you also see kind of a discount because I mean Portugal is a little bit on the periphery. So there's also this kind of value proposition that the Portuguese stocks have in this in the pursuit of an increase of the investment. I mean, utilities have been doing quite well. Okay, if you take a look a little bit in a long-term perspective, because more recently when Donald Trump was elected, specifically renewables kind of did not that well in the recent months. But I mean, utilities is usually a very defensive play. But also we have and let me go into another sector that I didn't mention before. It's a little bit more cyclical, but it goes along with this more value perspective that I was mentioning to you, which is the industrial players that we have listed in the Lisbon Stock Exchange. We have a very interesting sector, which is pulp and paper. Okay, so we have 3 companies in this sector. Okay. And they are usually cheap in the sense that, I mean, they are cyclical because they are a part of the industrial sector. But it's very interesting. We have companies that make pulp from the eucalyptus, and then we have companies that from that pulp they produce paper, and they are actually the number 1 paper producer here in Europe. So Portugal is very interesting in the sense that if you study really closely the companies that are listed, you always find this kind of particularity that may spark your interest on investing in them.
Nice. That's good to know that it's a different market. Yeah. It has its quirks, its own personality, but also allows you to diversify. And as we've been discussing on the moveCAST, it's a great way to move and also have some improvements on your wealth, but also be granted the nationality, the golden visa, and then the Portuguese nationality. Now talking about similarities, I think we can discuss a little bit about regulation
For sure.
and the stock market per se, not the companies themselves, but the structure and how do they look like and how do they work on your perspective?
Okay. Portugal is a developed market. Okay, it's part of the MSCI world in the developed part. So when in the US you have the SEC, here in Portugal you have CMVM. Okay, so it's the regulator. They take a look at the companies. They take a look at the funds that invest in the stock market. So you have this kind of security that you have a regulator looking in the market. Okay. CMVM is also a part, our Portuguese regulator is also part of a much broad regulator, which is ESMA, which is the regulator of the European Union. So you have this additional layer of
Double layering.
Exactly, that there is someone overlooking the market, okay? The American investor, any investor that invests in our funds, they can have... usually we give a handful of advantages. In this answer, I will give you just one or two. Transparency is very important because usually these investors pursuing the golden visa, most often than not, they don't know Portugal that well, okay? So they want transparency. So actually, you can see the value of their investments and the value of our fund daily in the website of the regulator. In any financial outlet, Bloomberg, you can check it out. Financial Times, you can check the value of our fund on a daily basis, okay? And then if you are that interested, you can
you can backtrack and
exactly. And not only that, but you can also see the assets that we invest in, okay? So you can have this kind of okay, I'm really interested what these guys are buying, okay? So you can check the value of our assets. It's completely transparent in the sense that there are companies that are listed in the stock exchange, so you can check on a daily basis, on a second basis, to see what's the value of the company. Okay, and then I would also like to highlight safety, in the sense that the assets of the fund belong to the fund owners. Okay, it doesn't belong to IMGA, where I work. It doesn't belong to the bank, where the investor may put the order to invest in the fund. Okay, they belong to them. If something happens to the bank, if something happens to the asset management company, it doesn't matter. The assets still belong to the investors. Okay, so you have this kind of tranquility that if something happens to one or two players locally, you still have your assets safeguarded.
Great, and we're talking about the players on the stock market. And now I want to focus a little bit more on IMGA.
Okay.
So can you tell me a little bit more about IMGA, about its investments, the profile? Present yourself to the audience.
Okay. Gladly. So IMGA was created in 1989. So we have more than 35 years of experience, and we have been growing since then very steadily. Very recently, we surpassed the mark of 5 billions of assets under management, okay? And specifically for the Golden Visa, our star fund is actually the fund that I manage, which is IMGA Ações Portugal, which literally translates to Portuguese equity. So it's very easy to explain to an investor what we do. We just invest in the companies that are listed in the Portuguese stock exchange, okay? And to try to illustrate this success, let me also put some figures in IMGA Ações Portugal. So 5 years ago, the fund was not created. Let me give you a little bit of history. The fund was not created specifically for the Golden Visa program. It was created actually almost 30 years ago, just as a pure equity fund, providing the investors exposure to the Portuguese equity market. So mostly for the Portuguese retail investors, okay? But it happens that it complies with the rules of the Golden Visa program, okay? And 5 years ago, the fund had around 25 million euros, okay? And nowadays has around 325 million. So we were able to increase our asset under management just in this specific fund by 300 million euros. And actually, as I mentioned in the beginning, besides Portuguese, the second nationality with more investors that we have is actually the Americans. In IMGA, besides this fund, which I am more comfortable to talk about because it's actually the fund that I manage, we also offer 3 other funds that are also eligible for the Golden Visa program. We offer an open-ended fund which invests in bonds, okay, in bonds of Portuguese companies. And then we have 2 other funds, one in private equity and one in venture capital. The one in venture capital invests in tech, in tech companies, in small tech companies here in Portugal. And the private equity one invests in senior residencies.
Oh, great. Let me just take a minute to talk to our audience and remember then that Martins Castro team is ready to help you build a solid international strategy. So scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description to learn more about this. We're now just getting an interesting point on discussing private and public investors here in Portugal. Can you just highlight the main differences from investing on the Portuguese stock exchange and on the private sector?
Okay, I'll gladly do that. So I think for me, as a fund manager of an equity fund, I think the main advantage is the liquidity. I mean, and it happened before. If you get fed up with Portugal, if you don't want to continue the Golden Visa program, you need the money for something that happened to you. Okay, since it's an open-ended fund, you can place the order to exit today, and 4 business days later, you have your money back. Okay, so it's very easy in this sense. You have this calm of spirit that if you really need to rush, you can do this. When you go to the private equity funds, you have these windows where you can withdraw your money. So it's not that simple because even because of the rules of the Golden Visa program, you have to be at least 5 years invested. Okay, so usually the private equity funds have this lockup period that tries to
follow the
exactly
the maturity
exactly.
of the Golden Visa. Yeah, that's great. So meaning that if you probably have lower risk and less exposure and more liquidity. So there's depending on the investor's profile, I think that's the preference, right? So the stock exchange is there in case they need this money quick or they need a safer bet to place their money on a place that is really well regulated and really transparent on the click of a link, and you can have all this whole information. Well, I think just to end up, I want to see your perspective on the Portuguese industries and the American investors. How do you see this movement on? I know that many of the investors on your fund, Assange Portugal, are American. What are their main questions or maybe main errors that they have on your experience that they do when they are applying? Just to share with our audience your past experience with the American audience.
Well, the American audience is not many times well familiarized with Portugal. Okay, so we usually try to explain that we have a very stable political landscape. We are within the European Union. We have the euro. So we kind of try to draw this broader picture, okay, of where Portugal sits within Europe. Then there's also a lot of questions about the economy, okay. We have a very much services economy, okay. So for example, this kind of tariffs that Donald Trump is implementing, I don't mean that it won't impact Portugal. Of course it will, but I mean the 15% of our GDP is related to the tourism. Okay, so we have this services sector that is very, very important, and it kind of gives us a little bit of more resiliency as long as tourism keeps growing. That has been growing in the last couple of years. Okay, and then there's also all the advantages that I mentioned before, that we have a very defensive profile in the companies that are listed. we have a very long track record in the fund that I manage, and also in the company. The banks that the investors usually go through to invest in our funds are also very well established banks. So we kind of also give this picture of stability in Portugal that I think is very important for a foreign investor, because I mean, I put myself on their shoes, not knowing a lot about the country, and those are the questions that we usually have.
Yeah, and I think you made some excellent points that stability goes through the whole Portuguese system, political, the financial regulators, even the companies. We are a very stable country and a safe place to invest.
And to live?
Yeah, and to live, definitely. And that's why tourism is growing bigger and bigger. Well, I'd like to thank you, David, so much for your time here. Thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for joining us throughout this special series of international mobility and investment. If you're ready to take the next step with confidence, don't hesitate to get in touch with Martins Castro team. Scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description. And keep following moveCAST. New episodes, new conversations, and plenty of opportunities to help you expand your horizons are on the way. See you in the next moveCAST.